I've heard that theme song. I call it a theme song. The countdown. Hey Devon, how are you? Good to have you. I've heard that so many times, probably hundreds of times, but I still find myself uncontrollably just going. Even though I've heard it like 60 million times, I think it's like my little psych up before going on to a show to like.
Yeah, do you know what? I kind of miss our former days in Canon Chatter and the intro song to that. Like, da, 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 da.
We shall find that out in good time, Stussy. We shall find that out. Good to have you. So yeah, me and Carl have actually spoke about that eventually when we get chance, because we've got lead busy lives, that we'll actually make an intro, so we haven't got the generic countdown one. But that's something to look forward to for everyone. So yeah, I really should have done it where I didn't speak about episode 1, but if you want to know what happened on episode 1, you have to go back a couple of weeks on the streams, because you did mention that. But I was quite, and then I had a little bit of a gap between 2, 3, and 4. So episodes 2, 3, and 4 is what we're going to be talking about today. It's been a journey over a couple of weeks of me watching it and building up the notes, so I'm really excited for this one. But first of all, Lee, how are you doing?
I'm really good, Sam. Yeah, happy to be on here and supporting you. You were on my channel yesterday. I'm happy to be on yours today and supporting Wrestle Dawgs.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a fun one today, because as I was thinking about who to get on, obviously myself, Kyle, Posh, we're all kind of around the same age. So kind of the regular people, and Devon's a little bit older than me and Carl. But I thought that the most authentic way of doing this is having someone that wasn't around at the times of WCW, and someone else to also that was around to see it, so that has got the knowledge of both watching the show, but then having the show kind of play out in real life as well. So that was my
being the oldest in the group is what you're saying, right?
Yeah,
really, aren't you?
I like to put it very
the old man.
No, we like. This is why I want to get you on shows, because like me, Kyle, Devon, and all the rest of them are talking based on the bits that we've seen. Yes, that's how I like, and it's got a different eyes on the product that I'm trying to not say we weren't alive for, but we weren't. Brilliant. There's no nice way to put that. But yeah, I do.
Like I said to you earlier on, mate. Like I said to you earlier on, I made an effort of. I mean, I was a WWF kid, but when I heard what was going on, yes, the very last episode of WCW Nitro, I made an effort of watching as live as I could get it here in the UK, and yeah, an absolutely incredible, astonishing television program that was. Really odd. Felt a really strange time, and yeah, I'm excited to go through it with you.
Yeah, because like I say, I can't find the words to it. I'm not articulating my words very well at the moment, but yeah, it gives a different, because seeing something on a DVD, like I can go back and watch WCW, is very different to actually seeing that product live. Yes, you see a
different perspective on it. Is a good word.
A different perspective, yeah. And like when we spoke about, for example, Bret Hart a few weeks ago, there were moments that, yes, I can talk about, but you can talk about having seen it. So that's very different a very different view to what any of us have, really. So this is why I wanted to get you on. So basically, we'll start at episode 2. They did very well to have kind of like a dynamic to each show. Off the top of my head, it's been 4 or 5 weeks since I watched the first one, and to be honest, I've got no idea what went on. So, as a kid, I had more WCW action figures than WWF figures. I imagine because they were probably cheaper to get. I was born in '99 when WCW first started going downhill.
Yeah,
that's cool. There was still some massive, like obviously because they were on WCW, they weren't as big as some of the guys that were in WWF at the time. But they've gone on to become like probably bigger than some of the people in WWF were at the time. So
it's some extraordinary names on that roster, mate. Absolutely extraordinary names. Booker T, Scott Steiner, DDP, Mysterio, Kidman. This is some Chavo as well, Chavo Guerrero, Hurricane as well. I mean, the roster is really, really stacked still. Of course, the NWO, Sting, Flair.
We could just sit here and name them off, and keep going for quite a while to what they've become. Like Goldberg, he's a lot in the series. Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, all these people that went on to be amazing things. All of their journeys started at WCW. So had it not have been, again, we can't script what the future would have been, but potentially we would have never seen some of these names in WWF/WWE in the future. That might have never happened. Episode 2, Todd Turner, they wanted a show called Thunder that would be at the same time, but would be a little bit like, the best way to describe it would be AEW's got Dynamite and Collision. So it's that sort of thing. So they wanted a show as well as Nitro.
SmackDown was a recent thing as well, wasn't it? And a recent addition to the WWF. So it's like having the 2 shows.
Yeah. So they realized that they might be too close together, but they went ahead with it anyway. They tried a new roster completely that would fight only on the Thunder shows, and then a separate kind of roster on the Nitro shows. That never kind of kicked off as such. That never kind of helped them. Bret Hart moved over to one of the shows. He's always in the documentary. It's quite clear that he was never a fan of anything that WCW did. He's been he was one of the only ones that was really animated in his views against WCW. Every single word he had to say was something of slander of them. So the 2 shows would be on a Monday and a Thursday. There'd be then a weekend show, and obviously pay-per-views. So at one of these pay-per-views, Goldberg and Kevin Nash had a match, but it was really botched, and eventually Kevin Nash got the title. Kevin Nash was meant to have a rematch for that title, but then Hogan interrupts. Hogan then pokes Nash, which was the softest possible poke you could ever imagine for anybody that hasn't seen it. And he went over like a complete sack of shit. And then Hogan went on to win that match.
Lisa,
go on.
This was the very same night, right? That I think, was it Shivani on commentary? Said on our competition tonight, I understand that Mick Foley, who worked here in WCW as Cactus Jack, is about to win their title. That'll put bums in seats.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah, that it's iconic because the way that they showed it in the documentary, they had this horrendous match at the time that people were so livid about, and that was also the same night that probably WCW were most famous for telling everyone that Mick Foley's going to win the title.
Yeah.
So, so this whole angle was made up so that the NWO could keep the title with them. All the wrestlers at the time were really confused as to what was going on. Like online, because there was it was kind of the start of the internet era. So there was very basic kind of communications and stuff. Everyone was also like, what's going on? What on earth? This is the most terrible thing ever. People feel like they've been screwed over. And then they spoke about in the first episode about another awful finish as well in WCW. That was another iconic moment that will come to me eventually. This is where I should have got my notes on the first one.
Oh, would this be the where Goldberg's streak ended with the cattle prod and Scott Hall?
No. I'm going to go back and find out what that is eventually. I'll bring up my notes now because I'm pretty sure. Oh, well, I say that, but I'm just.
We're live, pal.
We are, yeah. Well, we'll go past that. We'll maybe come back to it. So in that, as Lee mentioned, in that same night, they that's probably one of the most famous things that will go down in WCW folklore is that I think that's what people know them for if they don't know a great deal. They know them for, right, just to let you know, I don't know who got this information. It would be really interesting to know how they got this. Do you?
I know.
Go on.
Because Raw was pre-taped.
Yeah, that was it.
And so they must have had sources around when Raw was taped. So, and obviously they reported to Bischoff, and then Bischoff giving the instructions to Schiavone.
Yeah, because it actually, what they thought is, if people knew their ideas behind it, it was really daft to think it. But if people knew what was going to happen on Raw, they wouldn't switch over to Raw. They would stay and watch Nitro for the complete. But it actually backfired completely. And I don't know at the time, but I'm right in thinking that Foley was like up and coming then and hadn't really won the title. Yeah, the titles that he's got now. It was kind of his. So that would have been quite an oh my god moment because that was him kind of on the come up, wasn't it?
What would that be? Would that be 1999? I think
99 at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been Mick's first WWF title, that's for sure, and in a decent match as well. Actually, and there was quite a lot of excitement on the finish of it, if I recall as well. I do remember DX in the ring as well, celebrating with him as well. That's a strange image, knowing what we know now. But
I think it was also because The Rock was so big at that time. Like he was their superstar. Like for a superstar to be dethroned in any aspect, you're gonna want to see that happen. Like so, actually, it backfired on them, and most of the people that were watching Nitro then just switched channel and went over to Raw anyway. So that massively backfired. So this was quite a common theme actually. So Turner Broadcasting often took a lot of money away from WCW that they made to put into their other programming that was already down on money. So they would, so this would make WCW look worse because obviously because they have control of the money, a lot of the money that WCW make, they would shift onto their other debts and all the other programming that wasn't doing so well. That's quite a common theme over all four. Not only that, but whoever was in charge of the WCW books was paying the wrestlers massive amounts, like huge amounts, to what they maybe should have been on. And I don't think there was a like I imagine in WWE now you'll have your Roman Reigns, your Cody Rhodes, they'll be on one wage, and then you'll have different tiers of wages. Apparently there wasn't really much of that. It was just you all get paid massive amounts. Obviously Hogan and the bigger guys would have got paid a little bit more maybe, but even like the mid-carders were getting paid a lot of money.
I think the money thing was very much to entice them, wasn't it, to come over to WCW. Look, I mean, you talk about the Bret Hart a minute ago, right? I mean, I think Bret, after the 97 thing, you know, but even before then was in talks with WCW, because Vince said, look, I can't afford to pay you this guaranteed contract that I've given you for X amount of years. I think it was a huge amount of years, if I remember. It might have been like almost like a lifetime contract, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But then he said, look, I can't afford to give you that. And then it gave, it's almost like Bret had some leverage to go over, talk to Bischoff, and then
they often had like,
throw the money away.
As we'll find out in the last episode when all the contracts and stuff were talked about, they often had like 10, 15-year deals as well. So to get someone out of that deal is very, very, very hard to if you had a 1 or 2 year deal, because you have to pay them out the rest of your contract if you've got them on for that long. So they actually accused Eric of paying more money than he should have. He basically turned around and said, F you, like I don't have charge of the money, I just have charge of the creative, which
that sounds right to me.
Which does sound right to me in terms of, but I'm pretty sure he must have known how. Again, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because he will have known how much people were getting paid, but he hadn't necessarily had any say in. He could have said, well, it's daft that this person's getting paid that much, but that would only be a comment. That wouldn't have any actual implications into that person getting less money, which is one thing I'm really pleased about. I'll talk about it a little bit more in my comments at the end, but I'm really pleased that over the course of this 4 episodes is that the whole blame wasn't put on Eric Bischoff, because that's the narrative that's given out just on a passing, isn't it? And it has been all the time, that it was all on him. And when you look into it, and it's not that at all.
That meant that WCW went under. Well, so I won't elaborate too far, because I could talk for days. But you're absolutely right. Through certain talent, certain executives in TNT, Time Warner, and the likes. But we'll get into that in a minute. Yeah.
So it then went on to kind of talk a little bit more about Bret Hart. He came on a little bit more and spoke about Goldberg nailing him with a kick, which Goldberg didn't really. So the narrative behind it is that obviously, as you're wrestling a match, you know sort of what's going to go on to a little bit of an extent. You know the moves that are going to be done. But apparently Goldberg went completely off the cuff and decided to just plow straight through Bret with a kick. He said that in one of his quotes, he said that was one of the saddest days of his career and could have potentially ended it, because obviously part of wrestling is knowing what moves are going to come up so you can protect yourself in the best possible way. So if you don't have a clue about it, you're not able to protect yourself in any way. So you're basically taking that kick full force.
Brett will say himself, you know, you've got to look after your opponent as well, right? And from the incident you're talking about, I think Goldberg goes to Brett, I'm going to shoot you to the ropes, watch the kick, right? And Brett's like, well, what sort of kick are you talking about? He didn't know. Then all of a sudden he's come back, he's hit that thrust kick, and he's hitting full force right in the face. And you know, the poor man absolutely, you know, finished his career off. Must have given him a whopper of a concussion. obviously this concussion, the CTE thing, was very much a thing that was to be explored more as people were getting more educated on it as it went on. Brett went on to have at least another 2-3 matches after this. That match wasn't his last match. I do believe, I think he had a hardcore match at somewhere after this as well. And I'm sure that would have really helped his concussion issues. But yeah. But
it's not the only time, as we'll find out in the next episode, it's not the only time that Goldberg actually went off script.
Right.
Did something like that. So yeah. So yeah, Brett then went on to really slate Goldberg. So then the illustrious man who features so much in the series, It Hurts, Ted Turner did a merger with AOL at the time. Oh no, was this later? Hang on. AOL went with Time Warner in episode 4, so don't quote me on that one. I'll go back.
No one noticed, Sam. It's all right.
Nobody did that. So Eric was called to the office, and he was basically told after all this that he needed to go home. He thought he was just being kind of told to go home, like sometimes that happens. But in actual fact, they'd sacked him.
Right.
So he was a bit like confused because obviously at that time WCW had the viewing ratings where they had 83 weeks straight that they were higher. You were right with the 83. And I've put a note at that time that for all the success they were having, I did feel a bit sorry for Eric at the time because he was big time screwed over there. And I think he could have gone, do you know what? Like, F you and the company, like, I'm not coming back. But obviously, find out a bit later on that he did come back. Next, we have, I found this comment quite poignant. And if in 20 years' time that we get Who Killed AEW documentary, the same as this, I'm going to go and find Devon and give him a round of applause, because that's just like maybe a window into the future there. We'll see. Hopefully not.
You know what? I'll say let's hope not, because competition is good, right? It's good for the business. It's good for the talent. It's good for the fans as well, right? Yeah. Because, you know, over this weekend, right, we've had Forbidden Door pay-per-view, right? With New Japan as well. I'm not big into this stuff, but when you've got all these companies producing the great content, it gives people opportunities, it gives fans opportunities to watch the product, which this is why we're here, right? This is why we're watching this Wrestle Dawgs stream right now. It's because we love wrestling, right? So let's hope that Mr. Khan is a bit more sensible with his money than maybe other people who run WCW was.
I think it's I think the key difference is that there's obviously procedures and things in place that sets AEW up a lot better than WCW. So I don't think we'll ever see. Well, obviously I could be wrong, but we won't. I don't think we'll ever see that. I think AEW will keep on going because it's been going for a long time now, and I think
a few years, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think if anything was going to go majorly wrong, I think it would have happened by now. As you see, you could see that as I was watching it, and I've watched like Rise or Fall of WCW on DVD and stuff, the markers were always there. They were constantly falling out with Time Warner, and everybody was kind of in it for themselves. Like even the wrestlers, to an extent, were in it for themselves. So the writing was always on the wall, I think.
It's often said, Sam, isn't it? It's often said that the big difference between the two companies, the WWF and the WCW, is that there was one man writing and in charge of the WWF. And that is name redacted nowadays, of course, but it's Vince McMahon. He was the clear person to go to. He was the clear person who was in charge. Whereas the WCW talent, there's certainly a handful that I know about, and these are well-known names, and that had the creative control. They had almost sort of had a stranglehold on the company and what sort of direction that were taking. So if they sort of like, oh, I'm not going to put this guy over, and no, I'm going to win here, and I'm going to do this, and that, and the other. This is where there's a big difference, because there's one person right in the television program, right? And this is what you do. If you don't like it, there's the door.
I think a name as well is quite interesting, because I think a name that's missed out of this. So there's your key players in Who Killed WCW. You've got like Vince Russo, Eric Bischoff, all these names. But I think one that's missed out, and I don't think it should be missed out, is Hulk Hogan. It's not very it's not spoke about very much, but the amount of creative control he had basically meant that anything that happened, he could say, actually, nah, this is not happening. I'm going to do something different. And he did that a few times. So, yeah, I think that's a name that's missed, but I don't think it should be a name that's missed, because that's one of those key components to the demise of it. I don't think you can have, obviously we're seeing it at the minute with AEW and the Young Bucks, but I think it's really risky to have someone that is a wrestler on that product having any level of creative control. The Young Bucks maybe do a little bit, but the messages that they get will still come from above. They won't be just them. Whereas Hulk Hogan could kind of go completely rogue. He didn't have to listen to Eric. He didn't have to listen to any of the guys at Time Warner. He could just do as he wanted, really, which I think is one of the things that led to the demise. It's weird.
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, forgive me if I've not seen all of the documentaries that have gone out here, but I do know quite a lot of the WCW history, right? Now, do they bring up the match Jeff Jarrett versus Hogan at all?
Don't think so.
They don't, right? Because I mean, you can certainly look at that. Where what was the blimmin' pay-per-view called? Was it Bash of the Beach? I think it was Bash of the Beach.
Oh no, right? Wait, this is what was on the first episode, because this was the botch finishes that Hogan went and changed just before the match started.
That's right. And of course Jarrett's gone to the ring, Hogan's gone to the ring, and then before the bell's rung, Jarrett is laid down, telling Hogan to cover him. And then Hogan's on the mic saying, Bischoff, is it? No, Russo, is this your idea? This is the reason why this company is in the state it's in, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean that looked really bad. I mean, and some of it may have been scripted, but then where it gets all murky is when Russo comes out later and does the promo on Hogan, that big piece of, you know my character, and I ain't going to say the word, but you know what it is, right? Yeah.
Because that's what we spoke about that was when I mentioned earlier on in this episode, when I said about the other botch match, it was that one, because apparently they had, they told it on the documentary, if I can remember, is that they had come up with a script before of how the match was going to go, but then as the match unfolded, Hulk Hogan went completely rogue and kind of made his own script up, because obviously at the time he could. Everybody
was me, brother.
Yeah, everybody was like, "What on earth is going on?" So again, that was one of those, and that was the one that I alluded to. That was the other botch match. That was at the end of episode 1. I did remember now you've said it. So obviously, at the end of the second episode, we knew that the next one was going to be very, very interesting, because you could see it was centered around Vince Russo. Because obviously Vince Russo got creative control when they let Eric Bischoff go. And as it unfolds in this episode, they started working at the same time and stuff like that, but we'll get into it. So again, like I said, this one was centered around Vince Russo. Started with Vince Russo taking over from Eric, and the change in the program. They had him, which I thought was really interesting. They had him kind of directing it all as well. So you could hear it from his view on how he was trying to, because although a big part of it going wrong at this time was his fault. I still think watching it, he genuinely thought he was doing the right thing. Like he thought and believed. I'm just going to turn the light on so you can actually see me.
I'm sorry. I'm sure he didn't mean to jump off camera like that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, when these things need to happen, they need to happen.
I was about to go in the private chat and say, hit the light, mate.
So yeah, it's I tried to, obviously I didn't know a great deal about him as a person. I only know him as what other people explain him as. So it was nice to have him narrating at the same time as they were going through the program, because you could see actually he really did believe in what he was doing and he wanted to better WCW. Didn't quite work out that way.
It did.
So he tried to. So his explanation of it was try and make it more in your face. So everything was really fast paced. Everything was really edgy. It was almost like he described it as he almost wanted to make it like a movie, so that not only would wrestling fans like to watch it, but it might entice just the general population that didn't really like wrestling at the time to come in because of how fast paced it was. It wasn't much wrestling. It was a lot of promo. It's a lot of, just highly insane things that if you did now, you would be off the air in 5 seconds flat. So it was going okay to start off with. And then it started to not go into plan. Mainly the demise was when Eddie, Chris, Benoit, Dean Malenko, and I've put 5 names. It should be 4. So I've put Eddie, Chris,
Radicals,
and Benoit. Put a comma in it. So it was Eddie, Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn.
It's going to be Shane Douglas as well, but I don't think the Fed wanted him.
Yeah, so they basically just turned up on an episode of Raw. So they were
front row. They were front row interacting with Mick Foley. I remember it. Yeah.
So that was when
this was the sorry, Sam.
No, that's
this was the thing. So I think they put the title on Benoit, but I think on the very next day saying, "Look, it still doesn't matter. I still want to leave this company." So that obviously it led to the vacation. The vacation of the title.
Just catching up with some of these comments quickly.
Yeah.
Love it when Stussy's in the chat because it's always great to have interactions and comments as well.
Yeah, of course.
So they at that time they knew they needed to change something because those obviously apart from the NWO they were some of the biggest stars that WCW had at the time. So they was thinking if our biggest stars are jumping ship, we're clearly doing something really, really wrong. So they rang Eric and basically said, we want you back. Vince is not really cutting it. This is where the cross wires started to happen because when they rang Eric, they basically pinned it to him and basically said to him, you'll be overseeing Vince Russo. You'll be kind of like his boss in turn. But Vince was then getting the same people telling him very different. So the same people would be telling him, right. You're going to be working side by side with Eric. So in his knowledge, he genuinely thought that was you've got to go on what you said. So
set up to fail, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah. So this is where it all really started unraveling. So yeah, so basically he didn't know. He didn't know that Eric was his boss. He genuinely thought that they were working alongside to better WCW. So as Vince Russo kind of slowly is finding this out, he kind of goes rogue. They mess around with Kevin Nash a bit that he wasn't particularly happy about. Then there was one of the more shocking moments of the show. Really, Booker T believed at the time that WCW, because he was doing really, really well, WCW didn't want to make him their champion based on the politics that were around WCW and based on his skin color. That's what he believed at the time. And then they go on. So that will take me saying that will take note in a little bit as to what happened. Vince Russo took a real liking to Booker T, and we'll get to that.
Of course, yes.
But this is probably
what I was saying earlier on.
Yeah, this is probably one of the biggest moments that led to the ultimate demise, because as I'm sat back watching this and I've had time to reflect, this next part just begs belief. So they were promoting a new film at the time, which starred David Arquette. And Tony Schiavone basically went to Vince Russo at the time, who was in the back, and said, do you think it would be... I think it would be a really good idea to take the title off Diamond Dallas Page, who had it at the time, and give it to David Arquette to, one, promote the new film, but because the new film was really big at the time, they then thought people that like the film then might come over to our product. We'll help the film even more. They'll be happy. And David Arquette will have a starring role in this film and WCW at the same time. So in their mind, they were thinking, oh, yeah, this is going to get us mega bucks. But obviously, they would be very, very wrong. So basically, they took him off it. So Tony Schiavone went to Vince Russo and he said, yeah, let's do this. Sounds like a great idea. The next Nitro, so Diamond Dallas Page lost the title. David Arquette got it. On the next night, go on.
It's in a tag team match, because I'm sure the title was defended in a tag team match. I'm sure they were teamed up together, and I can't remember who, because Arquette got the fall. I can't remember who he pinned, but there's DDP celebrating with Arquette, but he's just lost the title. It's just insane.
It's one of those ones, isn't it, that as you were Diamond Dallas Page and you were told that, you'd have gone,
you what, mate?
Are you serious? You would have literally looked at him and have gone, you are taking the mick, right? This is a joke.
Yeah.
And then
people that know wrestling,
no, this is not a joke.
Tony Schiavone would have been an interesting head, because Schiavone at the end of it looked. If I mentioned Bash to the Beach, right, a little bit, poor Schiavone looked completely checked out on that. Looking at the announce table, he's like, "What is going on here?" And it basically killed his love of the business for a number of years, didn't it? I think we're lucky because Schiavone's good. He's really good on commentary and on AEW. So it's great we've got him back today.
I think to most people within that company at the time, that would have been their views as well, because everything was so in turmoil all the time. It was never really a stable place. It was never a good place. That must have what it would have been like for everyone during that time, and the whole, pretty much all of its run, because it was never they had moments where they were doing better, but it was never without controversy at any stage, really. So the next Nitro, Arquette comes on and basically said, I don't deserve the title, and I want to give it up. He said people like Booker T, because again, a lot of people at this time took a great shine to Booker T. There was Vince Russo, there was Arquette, there was quite a few of the wrestlers. So that was to kind of put messages in higher places in the head. By Arquette saying, yeah, people deserve this, like Booker T, it was sort of like, I think you should, telepathically, it was kind of like, give him the title.
This is the thing, because he'd been in a tag team with his brother Stevie Ray, Harlem Heat, for an awful long time. Always a really capable, good hand in the ring, always pretty safe hand in the ring. So yeah, absolutely done his time. He earned a run, didn't he? Absolutely. So yeah, like you say, telepathically sending the message that this is the man I think we want leading us forward.
Yeah. So so I've gone on to say that there was many nails in the coffin at this point. There was a point where Vince Russo went against the script at Bash of the Beach in 2000, shot a promo after Hulk and Eric left, which was fired at Hulk and Eric. After they'd not left the company, but left the arena. He'd realised that they'd left the arena and gone to wherever they were going to do. He waited for that to happen.
Back to Tampa Bay, Florida, wasn't he? Hogan was on the flight back home.
Yeah. And at the time, obviously, it was for the script and the story. But to everyone else, to all the wrestlers in the back, to the fans, it was done like it was genuinely serious, and he had this massive hatred towards both of them, which is why people go that he went off script, because he made it that realistic that the fans and the wrestlers didn't actually know whether it was truth or fiction at that point. So
blurred.
So it was like he meant it, and people did not realize that it was a script. Russo then went on to make Booker T win that title on that same night,
beating Jarrett.
Yeah. Again, that goes back to I think the whole reason that Booker T got that title there was Vince Russo. If it hadn't have been for Vince Russo being there, he wouldn't have had that title, because Russo took a massive shine to him. So did Arquette. That probably helped the process, but obviously he doesn't have any say in it. I've lost my. See, this is where a piece of paper, I can't suddenly go back up to the top again.
That's okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll stall for you for a minute, because Stu's saying in the thing, Russo claims to this day that the promo was planned and Hulk and Eric already knew about it. I think there was a plan as such for doing a promo, but I think the way he destroyed Hogan's character led to the lawsuit that Hogan brought on. Of course, this was the last time, that Bash of the Beach was the last time WCW ever saw Hogan.
Yeah. So Booker T won the title, but Eric and Hogan were still fuming that he kind of did this off his own back. So they probably did plan a promo together, but then Vince Russo obviously went off the cuff and did all this slander against them, because they wouldn't have agreed, neither of them would have agreed for Vince Russo to completely slate the life out of them, which is what he did.
Yeah.
So fuming that I didn't go to. Hogan wanted to sue Vince Russo as his contract was not fulfilled. As like we mentioned earlier, he had complete creative control, and Russo went against that contract and kind of made stuff for his own. So obviously at the time, if anything was going to happen, it had to be run through Vince, it had to be run through Eric, and it had to be run through Hogan. Probably the latter two more so than Vince Russo, because I think Vince Russo was basically the lowest form of authority at that stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically he had a lawsuit against him for a lot of money. I don't know what happened with that. I'm not really sure. But I would imagine that it was got out of some way. So after the pay-per-view,
I'll have to do my research on that. Stu says Russo claims to this day Hogan left the building known Booker would have ended the show as the World Heavyweight Champion, yes, I think that would have been the case.
Yeah, that probably was the case.
Because I think they planned to do something later down the line, didn't they? Similar to in the WWE with Punk and Cena, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that we had one champion that went off into the night sky, holding the belt. We'll have a tournament, crowning a new federation champion, and all of a sudden the two would clash to determine a undisputed champion, I believe.
Thanks for that, Stussy. It's really interesting. You can imagine that in court, can't you? When the judge is there and he goes, "Well, what is the reason you're here today?"
Yeah.
And
well, let me tell you, brother, I'm here today to clear my name.
And Vince Russo stands there
it's so fun
in the dock there, and he just goes, "Well, Judge, it's to do with wrestling." And the judge goes, "Isn't that made up? Isn't that made up anyway?"
Yeah.
I'm going to call this one out.
Dear me.
How can I claim that he didn't know Book and Jarrett would take place on that show? So yeah, it's all one big. Yeah, I think that last part of that sentence like clears it all up, doesn't it? It's just one big, humongous mess that nobody really knows what's going on.
Didn't Russo call the title the Hulk Hogan Retirement Tour Champion or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was in the promo, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And to shoot
this
fire
is all flooding back to me. This is crazy.
Yeah. To shoot fire on one of the biggest, not only one of the biggest stars.
Oh, biggest name in wrestling. There's no doubt. No doubt. Even now.
Yeah, and at the same time, someone who has full creative control.
Yeah.
You're playing a very, very dangerous game. Imagine the judge's reaction to hearing Hogan was mad about being called bald.
Why? Here's why.
So after the pay-per-view, Bischoff and Hogan went home as the whole creative control was going to be completely changing once again. They obviously didn't know that at the time, but it was. So a booking committee that was led by Russo was in charge of the show because basically Bischoff and Hogan both said, while he's in charge, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, I just want to take a step away. So now not only had Russo basically got full creative control at the time, he had also started writing himself into the shows each week.
Yeah.
He felt that he could deliver bigger ratings. He felt at the time that most of the people in WCW, he could bring bigger ratings than they were doing, which obviously is not the case because he's not a wrestler. No. This was what I was talking about Goldberg. So the end of one of the episodes, it ends with going over how much Vince Russo screwed the company. Yeah, and he started writing himself in shows. So even at this time, he even like placed a title on himself as well, which is absolutely nuts. Like obviously, name redacted / Vince McMahon
would never do something like that.
Yeah, gave himself championships and stuff like that, but that was for the greater good of the product, wasn't it?
Greater good.
Yeah. It was the whole.
It's a Shaun of the Dead reference, everybody.
It had use because it had that whole angle between him and Stone Cold and stuff. So that was for the right reasons.
Stone Cold, Gouda Gathering, Gouda Lee meets. Oh hell yeah!
Oh, you just picked up. There's no better time when you just picked up a can of beer, is there, to mention Stone Cold?
Oh hell yeah!
You can just imagine Anna walking into the room when you've got a couple of cans of that. That wouldn't be a good conversation to have.
Right. It's been a long day, mate. It's been a long day.
I'm sure she's seen stuff like that before. I'm sure it wouldn't shock her that much.
I'm probably worse, but that's for another day.
So basically, this is a bit about Goldberg. So Russo genuinely believed at the time that Goldberg was purposely trying to injure him because they had a steel cage match that they were both involved in, and Goldberg went a little bit off script again and kind of speared him straight through the steel cage, and he actually went onto an iron rail as well. And after that, he realised this is a big boys game, and I don't want to wrestle anymore. So yeah, it was a funny one because it was almost Goldberg pretty much saying, "Get off our show! Like you've got no place on this show."
I thought that's where the big boys played.
Yeah. He basically said, without actually saying it, right, yeah. I'm gonna seriously hurt Eric Vince Russo to the point he doesn't want to wrestle again just because we don't want him sabotaging this whole show like he was at that minute in time. Yeah. It's quite funny actually seeing Goldberg, like he didn't say much about it, he just kind of laughed to himself. So that was almost like, yeah, I did that on purpose just so that.
Well, you know, I don't want to upset a load of WCW fans here, but just watching a number of Goldberg's matches, did he have any care for the people that he worked for or with? Hell no. Hell no. Look what he nearly done to Mark Calloway. Undertaker. Look what he done there.
Well, you only have to look at that one going obviously over to WWE. That one elimination chamber that he was in.
Yeah.
That he just completely took over and absolutely
everyone,
every single one of the wrestlers to the point that all these other wrestlers that were really big names in that match just looked absolutely terrible. You can't tell me
Triple H though, could he?
Yeah. but you can't tell me that the powers above him then said basically make everybody else look shit and just make you look good, because that's basically what happened. It's great to watch because you just see someone absolutely steamroll through everyone. It's a fantastic watch. You've got to go and find it if you haven't seen it. But you can't tell me that the man himself, Vince McMahon, said, right, make everybody else look bad and just you shine in that match. So, I think you're right. I don't think he played to the rules many times, to be honest.
By the way, Bill, if you're watching, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
Yeah, he's sort of one of those people, I imagine, that would actually come to your house and find you. Like he wouldn't like. He's not sort of the person, I don't think that was. He
don't knock on the door. He headbutts it.
Yeah.
Hello, are you in?
I don't think you'd live to see that same day, if I'm brutally honest. But
I'll take him on. Bill, what are you doing at WrestleMania next year?
So
me and you in a steel cage. I'll take you on, brother.
Yeah. Did we ever see that? Did we ever see that match in WCW?
What's that? The
Hogan and Goldberg. I think they were at two different times.
Hogan and Goldberg went together. The only time I can remember the first time they did it was on a Nitro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just a random, wasn't a pay-per-view. It's just a random TV episode, Nitro, for the WCW Championship, I think.
Oh, wow. That's nuts.
I think Goldberg won, actually, so at least the right person kind of won. But I think Jackhammer, Spear got Jackhammer.
So then we have to get the tiny violins out for Vince Russo now. Because in October of 2000, he had written his final episode of WCW and was done. So these were his words, not mine. He was done and he did not care if he was in WCW anymore. He said that the business had mentally killed him and it was the reason he wasn't involved in the wrestling business anymore. But on the flip side, he also said this when they mentioned on the first episode about him being in WWE beforehand.
Yeah.
He also said the same comments about when he left WWE to WCW. So it's a little bit like, well, you've already said that, pal. Like, come up with a new script.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I put at the bottom, this was near enough exactly the same thing that he said when moving from from WWF at the time to WCW. So yeah, that was kind of fell on loose ears a little bit because he'd said exactly the same thing. The power of my tablet will now get up the document for the last
Amazing
episode, which is the one you also saw as well.
Absolutely. If we've got this far, by the way, guys, if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe to Wrestle Dawgs, and check out the Patreon if you're on patreon.com/Wrestle Dawgs for exclusive content. Check out the merch as well.
I may be on there in my back garden like you used to do when you were really young. In my back garden, practicing all the moves. Like, I might even do that if somebody subs to it. I'll probably break both of my necks, but I'll probably break my neck and
both your necks. How many necks do you have?
I've got two now. There's one just here, but you can't see it. I
John Cena.
I casually kind of flip a switch and then it comes out. So
Yabadoo, and there it is.
Maybe that's for another show. Who knows? Yeah. So this one was a really interesting watch. Actually, I really enjoyed this last one, probably more than any of the others, because, like I say, the others had a set narrative. So it was Vince Russo for that one. It was a certain time for that one. Whereas this was just kind of like a culmination of the reasons as to why potentially it broke down. The last Nitro, like it had lots of, and then in the middle there was lots of like dialogue between Time Warner and AOL and stuff like that. So it was a nightmare trying to do notes about it because I was stopping it every 2 seconds to make sure I'd portrayed it in the right way. Because for things like this,
so much to get through here, isn't there?
Yeah. So when it's as serious as this last episode was, I was like, I need to make sure that these things are right. Like, I can't be getting anything wrong. Probably have, it's me. But
don't put yourself down, son. Come on.
Here's me saying, oh yeah, don't worry, Lee, it'll be half an hour stream.
I was thinking that. I wasn't going to say anything though. I'm missing the second match here, mate.
It's Netherlands and remind me, Netherlands and
I'll have to check, mate. But go on, you carry on. Keep it going.
Yeah. So yeah, Stussy kind of already knows what's going to go down before I say it. So
Portugal versus Slovenia, by the way.
Oh yeah, Netherlands not at all. I think that might be tomorrow. I'm hoping. So episode 4 starts with a little kind of black screen with a little message across it saying that the footage filmed was by a cameraman named Scott Lansing, and it documents the final days of Nitro, and this footage has never been seen before by the public until now. So that started off a really cool narrative because you were like, well, nobody's ever seen this before apart from on this documentary. Like, I'm seeing somebody that nobody's ever seen. I've got to watch it now. So I thought that was really, really clever by Vice, to be fair.
Yeah.
So basically it started off by saying everybody knew that it was coming to an end at this point. It didn't really feel like the family unit that it had been before. And that most people are out for themselves. But I would question that most people are out for themselves from the start of it, really. I don't think it took this point to realise that. So Ted Turner took a look at the books and debated pulling it because they were spending more than they were making back. But obviously you must have known that because the whole run of WCW, that would have always been the same. It wouldn't have been...
I don't think they ever made much profit, did they?
Yeah. No. So it wouldn't have been a fact just at this last part of WCW, like, being around. That was, if he'd have looked a little bit more into the books, if he'd have found out along the 20-odd year run or whatever it was, that was probably right there from the start. So at the time, Time Warner were joining a merger with AOL. AOL, as we know, did a lot to do with the internet and stuff. They listened to podcasts of the producer of the show. Apparently, they didn't get access to the fun. Yeah, we'll go on to that because that was what me and Lee were talking about before because it was really interesting. So they merged together. A quote from Kevin Nash, which it really made me laugh because it took me off guard completely. Kevin Nash came up on the screen. He was always quite outspoken, which I really liked about it because he didn't kind of pull any punches. He just said it how it was. And he said, "What a bunch of effing boobs." That was.
Ain't wrong, is he?
Yeah, no, it wasn't any person in general. It was just that WCW as a whole, like through its whole run, through the time that he was in it. Diamond Dallas Page then echoed that and said it was that bad that there was no way on this earth that it could be fixed. So over the space of 2 years, a WCW pay-per-view that they had called Uncensored, in 1999, they had 325,000 buys/viewers. They did that same pay-per-view, and a year later, they only got 60,000 buys/viewers. So that shows like
a massive decline, isn't it?
So I'm not good at maths, so I had to rely on the show telling me this.
The Scots on the calculator.
There was so that's a drop of 81% in terms of viewership/buys, because obviously we don't know how many of those were just viewers and now would buys and stuff like that. So they both featured the same main event as well, which
you read your mind.
Read my mind. It's almost like we're telepathic. Yeah, it had the same main event, which never really sets you up to be great anyway if you have the same main event, unless
which was it Flair and Hogan? Yeah.
So like I said previously, there was lots of the debts from other divisions of the company, but they were all at the time being written off as losses by WCW. So we don't actually know which were losses by WCW or losses from another program or whatever they were doing. So Eric went to Brett Siegel at the time and said, "Why don't you let me explore selling WCW while it still has some value?" At the same time as that, AOL, who to Time Warner, they looked really, really a company that had lots of money, that were doing really well. But behind the scenes, that was very different. They were actually in the mud. So they needed the merger with Time Warner as much as Time Warner did, really. But they were kind of sold this amazing dream that AOL was up and coming. Because it was at the time, the internet had just started and they were making big moves in it. But obviously to do that, they'd borrowed a lot of money before. They were in those debt. So it wasn't a great merger anyway. So as this all was happening, Ted Turner loses control of WCW and its affairs. That was all down to the merger. Brad Siegel then rings Eric to say, "Do you know that thing you said a couple of weeks ago where you could find a buyer when it had some value? Yeah, I think you should go and do that now." So Eric said he'd never done this before. He had no clue what he was doing. So it was kind of, a shot in the dark. So he rang a guy that he knew called Peter Guber, who ran the Mandalay Sports and Entertainment Group, because he was quite a big, powerful name at the time. He said he wasn't interested, but he might know someone that was. So he passes on the details of Steve Greenwood and Brian Bedol. They owned a company called Fusion Media Ventures. They had created the Classic Sports Network, which then eventually became the ESPN Sports Classic. They had fantastic connections in New York and Wall Street at the time, so always looking really good. This looked great. WCW was going to be bought out someone that was really up and coming. someone that had a lot of eyes and feet, in the right places. Yeah, clout, you might call it. Yeah. Now we're down with the kids. That was what they would say.
Yeah.
So
I apologize.
But I know. See, the thing is, I know I'm not down with the kids anymore, because when someone sends me a text message, and it's got like an abbreviation of a word, I now have to go onto Google and see what that abbreviation is.
Good. I'm not alone. Good.
Yeah. So that's how I realise I'm no longer down with the kids anymore. So we had Fusion Media funded an initial round of $5 million of their own, and then they went out and raised $62 million in the market. Eric felt he was capable, with the right partners and resources, to save WCW completely. They went to Las Vegas, met with Hard Rock, who were building an entertainment center at the top of one of their parking lots. Parking lots being a very American term. We would call them car park. It's very different.
Thanks for explaining that, mate.
Just for our UK or American fans, maybe Devon's maybe not heard of that. If he's still here, he maybe thought it was parking lot and not car park. But we would. So basically, this place was due to hold 35,000 people, and they kind of negotiated with them that this could be a full-time location for WCW and Nitro every Monday. They planned to bring WCW back with a pay-per-view called The Big Bang, which was due to happen in May 2001. But obviously, we wouldn't get to that point. On January 11th of that year, 2001, it looked like WCW was all set and done and sold to Fusion Media for around $67 million. Their aim was to completely take over, and they wanted to eclipse that 83 weeks, make it 100 weeks, like 120 weeks, 140 weeks. They were really on board to kind of take over and make massive moves. At the same time, Turner Broadcasting guaranteed them the TV spots on Monday night and Thursday night at really good times again, like prime time, as they would call it in America.
Here as well, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah, I suppose it is kind of a word that we both use, but I don't think there is a prime time really for British TV anymore. I think it's just it's
a different age now, mate, isn't it? Where people are doing what they're doing on this channel right now, and looking at stuff on YouTube and television on demand and stuff like that. Yeah. It's a very different age now than when I was a lot younger.
Yeah, even when I was younger, you'd have that. The prime time was still your Saturday night, and like when families.
The party's getting hot.
You'd all come around as a family and watch all these shows. You'd have X Factor when it first started, and that was really
good game, generation game.
Yeah, and you'd have like Harry Hill and stuff, and that would be what you would call prime time British TV back then. But obviously now,
that's what I'm gonna have to call myself now, isn't it? Prime time Goonally Meads. What do you think?
It's quite a good nickname, actually. Quite like that.
I'll back it out of that.
What a legend. So they guaranteed them the TV spot, so all was looking really good. It was looking like they can make it profitable. The only thing they had to kind of secure now was the kind of advertising, the marketing, that sort of thing. But with all this money on board, they didn't think they'd have any reason to think they wouldn't be able to get all of this stuff. So they were scheduled to close the deal, but on March the 6th, there was a new CEO announced for Turner Broadcasting, who was a guy called Jamie Kellner. At the time, he was one of the best British. What am I on about? Chatting. He wasn't. He was very much American.
It's American male.
So he was one of the leading television executives at the time. He's known for the growth the Fox network when it first started. And he was also a founding partner of the WB network, which, for people that don't know abbreviations, was the Warner Brother network.
Okay.
I believe. But he completely hated wrestling, didn't want anything to do with it, and didn't get it. So, yeah. So that deal, as you'll find out, quickly became not a deal anymore.
Evaporated.
Brad Siegel sends a memo out to his employees that there would be a hiatus from WCW. So people thought it was just like a little break at the time. But a few days later, it would become apparent that it was not just a hiatus. It was to be cancelled completely after being on Turner Networks for 29 years. Yeah. So there's the iconic WCW that Eric Bischoff comes to the show by phone and basically says, from all that's recently happened, I want to send this out in a good show, because this could potentially be the last time that we'll be on the Turner Network. Yeah. He then, shortly after that, obviously I think you could kind of guess what was going on. He kind of obviously knew.
You could tell by the tone of his voice. He knew.
Yeah. But he did get a call from Brian Bedol, who was obviously doing the takeover WCW, and said it's done. Eric went on to say congratulations, and then he said back, "No, you don't get it. It's done." So the deal was over and off the table. Kellner didn't want the prime time being taken up by wrestling. He wanted other programming on it. Eric said that without television, the company was worth about $20, if that. Yeah. And then it was a bit weird, because the show took a little bit of a turn. Obviously, you work out later why it took a little bit of a turn. But randomly, this guy called Stu Snyder came on the screen, and he started to tell us that he'd been tell us a little about what he's done. He told us that he grew up watching wrestling. He was at Madison Square Gardens every month. It was a core element of his childhood. He actually joined the Turner Broadcasting Network in '93, but then his responsibility was to head up the home entertainment section of the company. He then left after that to do a few other things, which included becoming the chief operator of WWF Entertainment. At that time, he looked after kind of the core business to look at new opportunities. At that same time, obviously, he had... This is where the conspiracy theory comes at the end, because I thought that was really interesting. So obviously, he knows he's kind of reading what's going on in WCW. He said that he picked up the phone to ask if people at Turner Network were okay, because he had connections there, and he genuinely wanted to see if the people at Turner Networks were okay. But that wasn't his. He tried to make out on the show that they were his intentions, but we know they definitely weren't his intentions. His intentions were, right, what can I find out? What can I give back to WWF at the time to tell them about what's going on, and how could we capitalize on their bad doings and their misfortune, I guess. So I found that quite interesting, because you could see straight through this guy. Like, you could see that pretty much everything that he said was complete bull. And yeah, so that was quite interesting.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Yeah. Allegedly, I would say pretty much nailed on, but there we go.
I don't want to take us off air, Sam.
No, it's all right. There's things that we've said before that if they haven't taken us off air before now, I think there's a lot worse than that, to be fair, if you go through our streams and stuff. So, and I suppose unless this guy actually is watching this video and he comes for us, then we could be in a bit of trouble, but I'll take that risk, I suppose. So
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, this might be the last time. So he basically said that he rang them to check on their welfare, but obviously it wasn't that. He picked up the phone and spoke to Brad Siegel. And after the check-in, it was kind of to see if WWF at the time could basically purchase it. So apparently he didn't know anything about the Fusion media deal at the time, which again I don't really believe, because I believe it was fairly public knowledge at the time from bits I've read after. So it'd be pretty impossible for him to not know anything about it. So again, that was another kind of red flag, as the kids would call it now,
or as Steve Austin would go.
Basically he went back to the WWF and said, right, let's put a deal together to buy WCW. So on Friday the 23rd of March, the WWF announces that they've basically purchased the competition of WCW, which leads to the final episode of Nitro, which was on March the 26th, 2001. It was in Clearwater, Florida.
Panama Beach.
Oh, I'm making up Clearwater from somewhere. I don't know.
Sponsored by Clearwater. It's the clearest of all the waters.
Yeah, I don't know where I've made that up from. So they bought it. And this is where we...
my hands.
That was quite a good... it's quite reminiscent there. I did have to... If I closed my eyes, I would have thought he was in the room. That would have sent the fear of God up me, to be fair, but there we go.
I've already beaten God.
To be honest, though, actually, I don't know. I'm one of these people that would actually give the opportunity to people that have done bad, just to try and find out their psyche into why they did it. I'm all about picking somebody's mind into past traumas and seeing what led to them. But that's another story. I don't think that'll ever happen. So they purchased the competition. The staff or the fans at that time had absolutely no idea. And it's quite poignant that in the documentary you see a few of the wrestlers and staff that saw the run sheet of the show. Yeah. And they were kind of like, well, why is Vince starting the show?
What's this? Yeah, Dustin Reynolds, wasn't it? Or Goldust. It was certainly featured on this, and it's like, whoa, what's happening here?
And it must have been really weird at the time, because obviously most didn't know. But even if you did know, you wouldn't know why that he was coming on. You would just maybe think, oh, is he... I don't know. You would have never have thought at that time, oh, well, maybe because they bought out the company. That wouldn't have been in anyone's kind of remit. They would have just thought, oh, well, he's maybe just starting the show up. Like,
we should point out for people who didn't know that Vince was, of course, in the Monday Night Raw set, I think in Cleveland, Ohio, if I remember correctly. And Vince was very prominent in this WCW broadcast, this Nitro broadcast. And as mentioned down in the chat here, we're literally building to WrestleMania 17 here. Mm-hmm. And they had their pay-per-view to sell. And literally the branding is all over the place. You see, if you've seen both the shows, mm-hmm. You see that there's all branding of WrestleMania all over the place.
And they said, like, on that last episode, they had, like, some of the locker room doors had WWF logos on and stuff. Yeah. So obviously, if you were walking through as a wrestler, just seeing a WWF logo, you'd think, what's going on here? Something not quite right about this. I don't know why you've got a competition's logo on there.
It's not just that. It's the people running the backstage, running Gorilla, etc. As we said off air, The likes of Gerald Briscoe were behind the scenes. I think, oh God, this guy's name's gone from my brain.
It was quite interesting as well because it had like all the camera, like
Bruce Pritchard. There it is. There it is.
It had some of the camera crew and stuff talking about their experience of this time, didn't it? So I think that made that even more poignant because, like we spoke off air, is that these people just turned up to work one day and then after that Nitro didn't have a job. Like all these people that did just something like you said, as simple as like the catering, or somebody that was doing production, or someone that was doing the, I don't know, there might have been one person that was running bottles of water to people. Like all these people that had like all these jobs that without them, the company wouldn't have existed because they would have no one doing the bits that you don't see. For them to turn up one day to work, it's like me or you turning up to work tomorrow morning and them going, actually, we don't exist anymore. Like you haven't got a job. It's almost like that, isn't it? Yes, that's not going to happen because your place of work isn't just going to go overnight, and neither is the NHS. So
I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too. But so yeah. So basically, then what happened is Vince obviously started the show, announced in that iconic promo that I'm pretty sure every wrestling fan's probably seen. He starts the show and announces that he's bought his competition, that he owns it, and that the fate of the whole of WCW lies in his hands. And then Diamond Dallas Page came on shortly after that in terms of the interviewing and said that, like I say, the talent in the back and himself knew at this point that they'd won the war completely, and that there was not such thing as a war anymore between wrestling brands because it was completely over then. Like I say, the wrestlers didn't really know if they had a job moving over to WWF or whether they were just going to fade into wrestling oblivion, as the only way I'd describe it. So they didn't know at the time, obviously, whether they're buying or killing it or keeping it as competition. So there was a lot of fear of unknown, a lot of sadness, and a lot of what ifs. So Shane came in a little bit later on in that show to announce it to everyone. To basically say, yeah, we bought it.
In the simulcast portion of it, wasn't it? Where didn't Vince on Raw in the middle of the ring call out Ted Turner to say, look, we'll sign the contract at WrestleMania. And then this is the point where the music hit, but there's Shane coming down the ramp in Panama City to like, what?
Yeah.
Obviously, kayfabe, and this is all part of the scripted part of the Vince versus Shane story at WrestleMania. But
it does go into all of that stuff a little bit, doesn't it? Towards the end of like the documentary, which I thought was really good. So due to have a match that night with Scott Steiner and Booker T, they kind of came together. Yeah, so they came together before the match because obviously they knew what was going on at this point, and they said, look, with what time we've had, like with what time we've got now in the next segment, we've got to give it literally everything we've got. We've got to put an amazing match on because this could be our audition to either fade into that Wrestling Oblivion or move over to WWF. So they went out and gave a really good match. Booker T won.
For the time they had, I think they had about 6 minutes or so. But for that time, they was that at the same time? Was that still the title that Booker T had won on the Nitro or the show? So Booker was coming in as US champion. He beat Scott Steiner with the bookend.
Okay, so it wasn't the title. So it wasn't going as like he hadn't held the title for as long as like when he first got it after David Arquette.
No. Literally won the title, so that merged the two titles, showing that Booker was the front man of WCW at that time as it closed its doors.
Yeah. So went on. And then Booker T basically said he was one of the very few that were really excited about all of this that was happening. Like everybody else was just kind of heartbroken of it happening, because obviously, even though it was kind of all disjointed, everyone did kind of seem like one big weird extended family. Even though there was lots of the wrestlers, you could see most of them got on really well. The production staff, they were like family to each other. So there was a lot of sadness as well. So Eric said he didn't watch it live. He said he felt really sorry for all the staff and the wrestlers. Didn't really see it coming and had no idea what the futures were. Eric had walked away, I think, before this anyway, because he said he no longer cared about after. I think the writing was on the wall when all that deal fell. And I think at that point he would have gone, yeah, there's nothing really more I can do. I think it's going to go down. I don't want to be a part of it going down and being really sad for all these people that I've made careers of, basically, because that's what he did. He made the career of all these wrestlers. There's no sugarcoating around that. He definitely did. So Diamond Dallas Page then comes on screen. That was quite poignant. And he says there's a big F you to Jamie Kellner, as all the production staff that have worked there the whole time that WCW is around, all just lost their livelihoods just like that. So Guy Evans was on this show an awful lot, especially on the last episode. And I think he really, without having prior knowledge of being in the company, he knows probably as much as anyone, even people that are in the company. He seemed really well. That's why they had him a lot on the show, because he was well informed of what was going on. So this is where it all gets a bit weird, and it got really interesting for me, because the deal then came into question of how much it was actually sold for. So at the peak of WCW's powers, they were generating around $200 million a year. And the figure that it was actually sold for was a little over $4 million. Yeah. So you don't have to be
I'm glad that figure's the same as the one I've got in my brain.
So you don't have to be a brain surgeon or even a really intelligent person to work out that something doesn't quite add up there. As I've put, this is the next sentence that shows I might be down with the kids still. It says, I've put, it all seems a little bit booky, because that's what the kids like to call it now when it's a little bit weird and a little bit
booky. That sounds like a line that Hogan would have come out on a dodgy film.
Yeah, it's one of the words that all the younger generation are down with at the minute.
So for someone who's not of that cool down with the kids generation, what does that mean?
So it means kind of like weird, sus, as they would say, as they like to ban the word around. Sus, that's sussy. So it's a little bit suspect, like little bit what's going on. A
little bit dodgy.
So you can go down and say, this all seems a little bit booky, and she'll be having no idea what you're on about. She'll think you've gone completely back crazy.
Especially when I'm doing a show like this, it's fun.
So this led people to kind of believe that it might have been an inside job, and a little bit of, and this whole conspiracy side. So basically, Bob Ryder was a guy that did a lot of like the WCW.com type of shows. So like, for example, it would probably have been like a modern day example would probably be like pre-shows or like the bump or like little bit like segments like that a little bit. So he basically put out a big article to say that there was a big conspiracy at play. The article itself had said that Brad Siegel had sabotaged his own company by convincing Kellner to cancel the shows. he did this after he made a call to Stu Snyder and found out that the only way he could make a deal with the WWF was to cancel the shows and take the distribution of the programming out of the deal. His theory that Brad Siegel didn't want WCW as a part of the Turner portfolio, and this was the way he used Jamie Kellner to kill the deal. It all sounds a bit like when I actually read back that, it all seems like a load of just shit, basically. I can't think of the word, but it all seems like a load of
channel, mate, it's fine.
Loads of words put together, and it's just a load of rubbish, really. But there could potentially be some truth in it that Eric Bischoff later goes on to say. He's very guarded in what he says about it, because obviously it could still hurt his reputation if he was to go up and say, oh yeah, that conspiracy theory was definitely correct. So he's very cautious around the way in which, when he's asked questions about it, he actually says. So he...
hour and a half now.
I know. I'm gonna kill it. I'm nearly at the end of it. It's supposed to last an hour. The allegations of covert talks between Stu and Evans sold so little. Eric said that he didn't know if it was true, if it was a conspiracy theory, but there was enough questions and questionable relationships that lends an interest to this side of it. So I've then gone on to put. I was really hoping someone would say it was me.
It was me all along, WCW.
Maybe it was the person that made that comment, though. Was it you, Stussy? Are you sure? So I then basically put. This was when I went off the cuff completely. The Brad Siegel is full of shit. And Stu is Stu Snyder. That was my thoughts while I was watching it, and I still don't think that I was that wrong in that one. I'd still come up with that conclusion at the end. So Eric isn't sure of what actually happened, but he's kind of siding towards that it could have happened without him knowing about it. So I'm going to skip on because it goes on to obviously talk about where the WCW angle that went over to Raw and stuff and tried to compete with them. But I'm going to go over that because I think it's a good time to kind of.
We've got this far, mate. We could talk a little bit more if you like about it. I don't mind because funny enough,
I think it would be a good time now to just. So what I did to round up my notes was to collect together. They basically said all the people that had appeared in the show. They'd asked them one simple question: who killed WCW? So you got quite a lot of them I left on purpose without names because they weren't really big players. So their opinion, it doesn't really matter if I named them or I didn't name them. So the first one that it was the Turner Corporation. The second one was it was both AOL and Time Warner. Another person said that it was the guys in Turner who didn't want us or like us, and the top guys in WCW not letting the mid-card guys interact with them. Then they started to get to the people that really mattered. So Brad Siegel said, again, remember what I've just said about him. Apparently Brad Siegel said WCW killed itself, which is rather weird.
They killed their own creation.
Yeah. Because he said the cast and the characters was the reason that WCW killed itself, didn't function as a team, only as a bunch of self-seeking individuals, which I thought was quite poignant because I would say he's a massive self-seeking individual, but there we are. Kevin Nash, this was the most poignant bit of the documentary, I think, because Kevin Nash held a tablet and he said, I've never seen anyone that was this high up in the feud chain take less responsibility. He then turns the tablet round and shows Brad Siegel on the tablet and said that's who killed WCW. So I thought that was quite poignant after the comment he just made straight before it. So they did that really well, I think. Diamond Dallas Page said, who killed WCW? That was easy, Turner Sports. Booker T said, the person who ran the checkbook, Eric Bischoff. I was a little bit peed off with Booker T for that one, because that was the only person that blamed it all on Eric Bischoff. And yeah, I was a little bit frustrated at that, because it really wasn't. I think Eric Bischoff comes off really well from this series, and I'm really pleased about that, because, like I say, beforehand, everybody was saying, yeah, it's just him, but it really wasn't. Bret Hart went on to say that it was both Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff, because two guys that had zero knowledge about how to run wrestling, that put themselves in a position to tell people like me what to do. He was fairly bitter along the whole thing. I think he's a very bitter person in general, to be fair. But he really came across on this series like he hated everything to do with him at all.
That's a shame.
So Vince Russo said, as he says all the time, he uses the word bro every two sentences.
Bro.
So bro, they took
Matt Riddle who killed it.
It took such a drop from where they were to where it was when it was sold. So much money was lost. I don't think anyone could have done anything. So it would have been a business. So it was a business decision that killed WCW. So these last two are the ones that I think have the most sense. My laptop is about to die, so I don't want to go an hour and a half and then not get to the end of my notes. So I'll probably cry now after it should have been half an hour.
I mean, as long as you pay me the overtime, mate, it's fine.
I wish I had the powers to do that. I really do. So these are the two that really stuck with me, that were the best observations in my because obviously you form your own conclusions with shows like this. And these were the two that spoke to me the most. Goldberg says, I don't think that one person could have killed WCW by any stretch of the imagination. There was a shitload of people who contributed to its downfall. That, and then the one after, was kind of the best explanations, the one that spoke to me the most. The guy that was mentioned in one of the comments just here, the guy that wrote the book called Nitro, The Incredible Rise and an Inevitable Collapse of Ted Turner's WCW. Guy Evans, he said it was a collection of factors, a number of reasons that explain its demise, and there's plenty of blame to go around. But ultimately, I think it was inevitable that it was going to fall apart. I think that's kind of the message that I've had along this whole of this stream, is that it wasn't just one person; it was a collection of everybody involved.
I'll go along with that. Absolutely, there's lots of factors why it closed in the end, and so it's just unfortunate for the business as a whole, isn't it, that it went under as it did.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say before we do wrap it up is that it was quite fitting that the last match that was broadcast on Monday Night Nitro was Flair against Sting. Now, Sting hadn't been seen in months, but he magically appeared backstage that night. And although Ric Flair was not in any sort of ring condition, I think it was quite nice that they gave him that little bit of time as a bit of respect for him and for Stinger to go out. And I mean, it was again, the matches on the whole card here were quite small, right, quite short, but it was quite nice that they could put up a decent match, and it's still around. Actually, you'll still see it on YouTube somewhere.
I think this is definitely. I think this whole documentary is definitely going to make me go back and see all of these WCW type matches that I've got on different DVDs. I think it's going to give it a different light to me now, having watched this.
Definitely.
Having watched this documentary and really studied it.
It'd be very interesting for a lot of the younger fans. That's absolutely right, Sam. Absolutely right. For people who hadn't had the chance to see it live, to see how it all went down. Definitely.
I think by doing notes about anything, you somewhat have to study it a little bit and kind of fill in the gaps that the show doesn't necessarily tell you. So just a quick one before I finish up. So there was a nice little tribute to WCW at the end. A great quote that actually I wanted to note down. I don't know who said the quote because they didn't tell us who it was. But I thought it was really poignant. It says, let us remember the lessons learnt and strived to build a fair and more equitable future. Got to read my writing. Equitable future for wrestling. I thought that was quite poignant, and it kind of puts the whole thing together, doesn't it? Maybe that paved the way for the future of wrestling that we have now in its downfall to build a better future than what we've got now. So there was a VT shown of Eric, and it was Kevin Nash talking over it. And it said that I think this was a nice way to end it as well. He said, I still think that when it comes down to it, WCW was Eric's creation. Any success that they had was with Eric. It pans to Eric holding the tablet, listening to what Kevin Nash is saying, kind of nearly tearing up and saying, there's nobody on this planet that can look in the mirror and say, I beat Vince, professional wrestling, for 83 weeks. It's a pretty effing huge accomplishment. Eric looks close to tears and just nods his head and says, cool. Ends with Eric saying that we were the number one wrestling company on the television in the world at one time. And he's very proud of that, and he's grateful for every minute. So, like I say, I think I will come away from the documentary with a lot of admiration for what Bischoff did. I don't think he's given anywhere near the amount of credit he deserves because, yeah, like we spoke about earlier, when you do WWF over for that amount of weeks in the ratings, that's got to have an impact on WWE. They'd have to gone, right, what on earth do we need to do to get this back? And if they didn't, that could have been 183, 283. So actually, it probably paved the way for the WWE that we have now because they had to adapt, they had to change, they had to make everything better.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, there's probably so much more we could say about other factors, but in terms of wanting to wrap this up, yeah, I think that's a really nice way of finishing it. I think for a lot of people, WCW will be a very fond memory. Certainly for the large part of it, it got people talking. It got, you look at certain incidents that happened. Hogan turning heel, dropping the leg on Randy Savage to join the New World Order, the impact that had on the business. But wow, this is all sort of the new cool sort of thing that everyone's doing. Like I said, it's unfortunate it had to end, and like you said, hopefully that the business as a whole would have learned from mistakes that were made, and that's and competition is good for the product that we know and love. So
I think to bring that back to real life, it's probably why we've got so many like different promotions now excelling like they are. We don't know, had it not been for all this downfall of WCW and even ECW, would we have all of the amazing products that we have now? Probably not, because we wouldn't have learned those lessons and we wouldn't have known what it's like to create a successful business in wrestling. Like, we wouldn't have all these like Lucha Libre companies, we wouldn't have all these like British companies we've got. Like, it just wouldn't be happening. So I guess it's quite important in the whole grand scheme of how we're doing this, sat here today talking about men wrestling and women wrestling now. So yeah, it is quite poignant, and I think it's important to go back. Thank you, Stussy, for getting involved. I think that was quite good, and that's a good way to end. Nothing to be ashamed of. He had his success and failures, but did some really cool stuff. Would like to extend my Instagram to Stussy, because obviously you're in the comments here a lot. I'd love to kind of have your input in shows and stuff. So I am going to put my Instagram up somewhere because I haven't got a fancy banner for it. But I'm going to quickly change one, which was meant. I did have a banner for each episode, but as I got talking, that kind of went away.
Live admin, admin broke,
So that's my Instagram, Stussy. If you're still here, don't have Instagram, unfortunately. Please tell me what social medias you do have. Just very quickly, I'll go to Lee first. Where can they find you on this wonderful space that is YouTube?
Well, what I will say first and foremost is thank you very much again for having me. This has been a very enjoyable podcast. My normal home on YouTube is, of course, Gooner Gathering. There it is, where Sam very helpfully was with me last night. We went through the England game. That was an interesting stream, to say the least. You can also find me at Goonerly Meads. You find my channel at Gooner Gathering on X as well. Of course, there's the Instagram and TikTok, all of the same name. Gooner Gathering, we watch Arsenal, so you don't have to.
Yeah, see, I'll be pleased to have that back, though, because I'm a bit bored of the Euros now, to be honest. I also had this
yesterday.
I also had this little banner, which I didn't show at the time, but we've kind of done that already.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm pretty sure Kyle's got a video that is almost ready. I don't know the content of it. It's as much as a surprise most of the time for me as it is for all of you watching. You only get to see a little bit of the creative edge. I sometimes get asked which title sounds better, but that's about all I know. So yeah, obviously find us on here. Don't know if we're going to have a stream now until after Money in the Bank, because of me not being in the UK and Carl being busy with other videos. I would have liked to spoke about Forbidden Door, but I think I'm going to speak about that at the same time as Money in the Bank. So that will be not this week.
Be another 3-hour stream, everyone.
Yeah, it will be, because if I've got to speak about Forbidden Door and Money in the Bank, and I won't talk about everything that's happened in between. I think I'll just literally focus on those two pay-per-views, because I think it would be quite cool to literally just talk about those two and compare them and have a nice panel of people that are watchers of both, and we can kind of do a Monday Night War, but with Money in the Bank and Forbidden Door. So yeah, so that's that. Don't know if Stussy's still here or not, but if not, I'm sure we'll get to you eventually. It'd be good to have your input on things. So yeah, half an hour stream that's turned into 1:48.
Nice.
So yeah, I wasn't meant to be packing for going away, but that's not happening. So so yeah, see you all soon.